She cleaned his mansion in silence, never looking up, never asking for anything. But one day, the billionaire walked in and found her notebook filled with drawings of homes she would never live in and dreams no one ever noticed. That moment, it changed both their lives, because the girl everyone ignored was about to design hope for the world. Welcome to Hearts and Billions, where the rich meet the broken, and one moment changes everything. Love, loss, redemption, all in one story. Subscribe to feel every heartbeat. Please kindly take me to 1,000 subscribers. Every morning, while the world still slept, Lena walked up the long, icy driveway of the Reed estate. The mansion was cold and massive, taller than anything she'd ever lived in. Its windows glowed like distant stars, but none of that light ever touched her. She wore the same gray sweater every day, its sleeves stretched from too many washes, its hem stitched by her own hand. Her shoes were 2 sizes too big, stuffed with socks to keep from slipping. She didn't belong there, not in the halls with marble floors, not among the gold chandeliers or the polished staircases. She belonged to the shadows, the corners, the places no one looked. Lena never spoke unless spoken to. Even then, she kept her answers short. "Yes, ma'am." "No, sir." Right away. She cleaned floors that her family would never walk on, washed dishes that cost more than her rent, dusted off frames of people who smiled in silk and pearls, while her brother waited at home, hungry and quiet. No one in the mansion knew her story, that her mother died when she was 14, that her father left 3 months later, that she'd been working 2 jobs since she was 16 to care for her little brother, Noah, who hadn't walked since the accident. They just knew she was the girl who came in early, didn't complain, didn't ask questions, always disappeared before lunch. But what they didn't see was that every time Lena scrubbed the floors, she was also sketching blueprints in her mind. Every time she dusted the library shelves, she imagined staircases and rooftop gardens. Every time she polished the windows, she dreamed of homes full of warmth and music, not silence and struggle. But those dreams lived only in a worn notebook she kept tucked in her bag. No one had seen it. No one had asked. To them, she was just the cleaning girl. But she was so much more. And one day, someone would finally notice. The mansion disappeared behind her. As soon as Lena stepped through the side gate, she wrapped her arms around herself and started walking. The wind cut through her sweater. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the streets were still quiet. But her world, outside the gates, was nothing like the world she'd just left behind. She didn't take a car. There was no driver waiting for her. Just a cracked sidewalk, a long walk, and a tired girl holding a tote bag with cleaning supplies and a half-eaten sandwich. After 45 minutes, on foot, Lena reached her apartment building, a gray, leaning structure that smelled of old pipes and burnt toast. She climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. No elevator, no heat. The door creaked open to reveal a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. The curtains were blankets. The kitchen light flickered. But in the middle of the room, sitting in a wheelchair, was her whole world. Noah, her 10-year-old brother. He smiled the second he saw her. "You're back early," he said. Lena knelt beside him and smiled back. "The new staff was slow today," she replied. "I got ahead." She didn't tell him that she skipped her break again, or that her back hurt, or that someone spilled wine on the rug and she was blamed for it. She just unpacked a small sandwich, split it in half, and gave him the bigger piece. "I drew something," Noah said, pushing a paper toward her. It was a messy crayon picture of a house, with a garden, a big blue roof, and stars drawn above the windows. "That's our future house," he said proudly. Lena looked at it for a long time. "You remembered the stars," she whispered. He nodded. "You said we'd have lights on the ceiling, like in movies." Lena blinked quickly, forcing the tears back. She kissed his forehead. "One day, Noah, I promise." And deep down, she meant it. Because the notebook in her bag wasn't just filled with dreams. It was filled with blueprints, plans for homes that felt like hugs, for places where no child would sit in the dark, for a future where girls like her didn't have to scrub someone else's floor to survive. But for now, she cleaned, and she dreamed, until someone gave her a chance. Every mansion has a room no one uses. At the Reed estate, it was the 2nd-floor library. No meetings happened there. No guests went there. The windows were always shut, the curtains half drawn, and dust lingered in the corners. But to Lena, it was a secret world. When her shift allowed, after the kitchen was spotless and the marble floors had been mopped until they gleamed, she would quietly slip upstairs. She always checked first. No cameras in this wing, and the guards never noticed the girl in the grey sweater. She'd tiptoe in, shut the door softly, and breathe. It was the only place where no one told her what to do. No orders, no voices, no footsteps behind her. Just silence, dust, and the heavy smell of old leather and paper, and a wide desk beneath the window. That desk became hers just for a few minutes a day. From her bag she pulled out her treasure. A worn notebook, edges frayed, cover softened by years of fingerprints and rain. Inside were pages filled with dreams, not words but buildings, drawings of houses with wide porches, shelters with skylights and reading corners, community centers with ramps and gardens and places for kids like Noah to feel safe. She wasn't formally trained. She had never gone to college. But Lena taught herself how to sketch from old textbooks, free PDFs and hours of watching, YouTube tutorials by candlelight. Every line she drew was full of feeling. Every room she designed had a story behind it. A need, a pain, a hope. She didn't want to build for rich people. She wanted to build for kids sleeping on mattresses near open windows, for mothers who cried in silence, for herself, for Noah. One afternoon, she was sketching a new design, a TE, quiet housing unit with rooftop, gardens and solar lights, when she lost track of time. She was so focused, she didn't hear the footsteps outside the door, didn't hear the knob turn. The door creaked open, and standing there, dripping wet from rain, jacket slung over his shoulder, was Mr. Elias Reed, the billionaire, and he was looking directly at her. The door swung open with a soft creak. Lena froze. Her pencil stopped mid-curve. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She turned slowly, and her eyes widened in horror. Mr. Elias Reed was standing in the doorway. He looked nothing like the calm, polished man she'd only seen in news photos. His designer coat was soaked, rain dripping from the hem. His dark hair clung to his forehead, and his tie was loose around his neck. But his eyes weren't angry. They were confused, startled, even curious. Lena stood up too quickly, knocking her chair over. Her sketchbook fell from the desk and spilled across the polished wood like a confession. Dozens of pages, dozens of dreams, all exposed. I'm sorry, she stammered, voice shaking. I was just cleaning, and I didn't touch anything. She knelt to scoop the pages, but her fingers were trembling. Her ears burned, her vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. But Mr. Reed didn't yell. He didn't call security, didn't lecture her, didn't ask what she was doing in the one room no one entered. Instead, he stepped forward. Slowly, silently, he picked up one of her sketches from the floor, carefully, like it might fall apart in his hands. It was a drawing of a home with wide open windows, sunlight pouring through, a child's wheelchair in the hallway, a hand-painted mural of stars on the ceiling. He studied it for a long time, then looked at her. You drew this? Lena didn't know how to answer. Her throat was tight. Her hands clutched the rest of the notebook to her chest. Yes, she whispered. I just do it for fun. It's nothing. Please don't. This isn't nothing, he said quietly, still staring at the sketch. Who are you? She didn't know what to say. To him, she was the girl who scrubbed kitchen floors, the girl who disappeared before anyone noticed she was there. But now, she wasn't invisible anymore. She was exposed, and he had questions. Lena's hands were shaking as she snatched her sketchbook from the floor. She hugged it tightly to her chest, her breath short and fast. I wasn't stealing anything, she said quickly, her voice cracking. I just sit here when the rooms are clean. I know I shouldn't. Mr. Reed didn't move. He was still holding the page in his hands, still staring at it like it held a memory he couldn't quite place. You designed this? He asked again. Lena nodded barely. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed, get out before he fires you, before he calls security, before he tells the others you don't belong here. She grabbed her cleaning bag, eyes fixed on the ground. Please don't tell anyone, she whispered, her voice trembling. I need this job. I swear I didn't touch anything important. As she turned to leave, her foot slipped, her shoulder hit the desk, and the notebook flew open. Pages scattered like leaves in the wind. Dozens of sketches filled the floor. Homes with ramps and skylights. Playrooms for disabled children. Emergency shelters with gardens and sun. Designs full of light, softness, and love. Elias slowly bent down. He picked up one, then another, then another. Each one had soul, not just structure, but emotion. The kind of detail no architect ever submitted to his company. The kind of vision you couldn't teach. Lena knelt to gather the pages, her eyes glassy with panic and shame. "They're just doodles," she mumbled. "I do them for fun. For my brother. It's not professional. Please just forget it." Mr. Reed looked at her. Really looked. For the first time, he saw not a cleaner, but a creator. Tired, scared, and hiding brilliance in a notebook. "You shouldn't be cleaning floors," he said softly. Lena flinched. "Please," she whispered, "don't take this away from me." "I'm not here to take," he said. "I think I'm here to give." The next day, Lena didn't return to the mansion. Her time card was never punched. Her grey sweater wasn't seen. Her quiet footsteps were missing from the marble halls, Mr. Elias Reed noticed. More than he expected. He stood in the same library, holding her sketchbook in his hands. She had forgotten it in the rush, or maybe left it behind on purpose. He didn't know. All he knew was he couldn't stop thinking about the girl with the notebook, full of blueprints that looked like dreams. Elias Reed had everything. Wealth, power, influence. But that night, none of it mattered. Because his mind was stuck on a girl whose name he barely knew, and a notebook filled with quiet genius. He couldn't sleep. He sat in the dim light of his study, flipping through her sketches for the third time. Each page was haunting, not because of mistakes, but because of feeling. Every room she designed had purpose. Every line was drawn for someone who had once been forgotten. He leaned back and closed his eyes, and then something strange happened. He saw her face in his mind, Lena, not the girl who cleaned, but the girl who sat with stars in her hands and a storm in her chest. And suddenly, he saw someone else, his sister. It was raining again. Elias Reed stood at the edge of a quiet city bus stop, holding a black umbrella and a folder in his hand. Inside the folder were copies of Lena's sketches, scanned, printed and studied for days. He hadn't slept. He hadn't shaved, but he had finally found her. One of his security team had tracked her to a part-time job at a small local cafe. No titles, no name tags, just Lena wearing an apron, head down, wiping down tables as if she were invisible to the world. He watched her through the window. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from lack of sleep, but the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. He stepped inside. The door chimed softly. She didn't look up. Until he said her name, Lena. She froze, then slowly turned, eyes wide, face pale. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice barely audible. "I've been looking for you," he said gently. She glanced around nervously. "You shouldn't be here. Please, you'll get me fired." "Then let's go outside," he offered. She hesitated, then nodded. They stood under the awning, rain falling all around them. Elias opened the folder and held it out to her. "Your work doesn't belong in a notebook," he said. She looked down at the pages, her breath catching in her throat. "I told you. It's just sketches. I'm not an architect. I didn't go to school. I'm no one." "That's not what I see," he replied. "I see designs more thoughtful than any professional firm I've hired. I see buildings drawn with emotion, with purpose. Not just walls and windows, Lena. You're drawing healing." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why do you care?" she asked, voice cracking. "People like you don't see people like me." He stepped closer. "I didn't see my sister either. Until it was too late." She looked up, confused. Her name was Eva. She wanted to be an architect too. She never got the chance. He placed his hand over the folder. "But you're here. And I won't let another brilliant girl be erased." Lena didn't speak. She just stood there, shivering, overwhelmed, unsure if this was real. But in her heart, for the first time in years, she felt seen. Her name was Eva. She was quiet like Lena, bright, kind, always sketching in the margins of her school books. She wanted to be an architect too, but no one took her seriously. Not their father, not the system, and eventually, not even herself. She struggled silently until her silence turned permanent. She passed away at 19, a car accident on the way to her part-time shift at a diner. She never got her chance. Ilias had buried that grief, focused on business, buried it in skyscrapers and profit margins. But now, staring at Lena's designs, he saw Eva's spirit again, not in the style, but in the soul. He stood suddenly and walked to the window. Rain was falling. Again. Same as the day his sister died. And now another girl was out there, just as talented, just as unseen. He clenched his fists. Not this time, he said aloud. Not again. He didn't know where she was, but he knew one thing. He was going to find her. And this time, he was going to listen. That morning he called. His assistant. Who's the cleaner who works on the East Wing? Small, brown hair, quiet. I need her file. There was silence on the other end. We outsource the cleaning staff, sir, his assistant said. I can try the agency. But even the agency didn't know her real name. They only had a partial file, a first name. No address, no emergency contact. Just this. Status part-time. Assigned, read estate, low security zones only. Notes quiet, doesn't speak unless spoken to. Works weekends and doubles. Ilias leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. You mean to tell me I had a genius cleaning my baseboards and I didn't even know her last name? He spent the rest of the day different than usual. He didn't attend meetings, didn't approve reports, didn't return calls. Instead, he sat at his desk, flipping page by page through the sketchbook she left behind. Each drawing told a story, not just of buildings, but of someone who wanted to fix what the world had broken. One design showed a women's shelter, shaped like a spiral, so no one ever felt trapped in a corner. Another had small rooftop greenhouses attached to low-income housing units. Another, a playground fully wheelchair accessible, wrapped in bright, joyful murals. Ilias was stunned, not only by the skill, but by the heart. This wasn't some hobby. This was someone born to build beauty for the forgotten, and he had walked past her for months. By evening he was pacing. He looked out the tall glass window of his study and whispered, "Who are you, Lena? And maybe more importantly, where are you now? And how do I find you?" The rain had slowed, but Lena's thoughts still raced like thunder. She stood outside the cafe, soaked to the bone, holding a folder, full of her own dreams she had never shared with anyone except her brother. And now a billionaire had found them. Ilias Reed watched her quietly. He didn't pressure her. He didn't try to convince her with money or promises. He just stood there, waiting. Finally, Lena spoke. "Why me?" she asked. "There are real architects out there. People with degrees, portfolios, offices. I clean houses." Ilias nodded. "Exactly. You cleaned houses. And still created this." He tapped the folder gently. "You did this with no help, no support, no spotlight. That tells me everything I need to know." Lena swallowed hard. "And what do you want from me?" He smiled, softly, not arrogantly. "Nothing. But I'd like to offer you something." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crisp envelope. Inside, an invitation. A spot at his company's innovation lab for underrepresented creators. A chance to shadow his architectural team. No contracts, no expectations. Just opportunity. "I want you to come to my office tomorrow," he said. "Not as a cleaner, as a creator." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "What if I mess it up?" Ilias looked her dead in the eye. Then, "We learn from it, but you won't be alone. I missed my sister's chance to change the world. I'm not going to miss yours." For a long moment, Lena said nothing. She looked down at the envelope, then at the folder, then at her own hands. The same hands that had scrubbed floors, washed dishes, held her brother, drew worlds that never existed until now. Finally, she nodded. Just once, and Ilias smiled. Because sometimes the biggest revolutions don't start in boardrooms. They start in the hands of someone no one saw coming. The next morning, Lena stood in front of a mirror, wearing clothes she didn't recognize. A soft blue blouse, pressed black pants, a leather folder tucked under her arm. The outfit wasn't fancy, just new. A gift from Ilias's assistant with a note. "You're not dressing up to impress. You're dressing up to be seen. By 10 a.m., she was standing in front of a long glass conference table. On one side sat the most powerful people in Elias Reed's company, architects, investors, board members, men and women in suits who had never cleaned their own kitchens, let alone understood what it meant to grow up hungry. Elias stood beside her, but didn't say a word. This was her moment. Lena took a breath and clicked the first slide. The screen lit up behind her. Homes that heal. A new kind of housing initiative, designed not just for shelter, but for emotional healing. Each unit had natural light, community gardens, creative therapy spaces, and family-friendly layouts. She spoke slowly, voice shaking at first. These homes aren't about numbers. They're about people. They're for kids like my brother Noah, mothers who've escaped abuse, fathers with disabilities who are tired of stares and silence. She clicked through drawings, beautiful, raw, hopeful. Designs from her notebook, now on a screen in a boardroom, in front of the people who once walked past her like she didn't exist. For a few seconds after she finished, no one spoke. Then a voice broke the silence. Who helped you with these designs? No one, she said. I taught myself. Another voice. How did we never find her before? A third. She sees things our firm has never even considered. Then applause. Slow, scattered. Then stronger, louder. Even some of the executives stood. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. You didn't just pitch a project, Lena. You reminded them why they started building in the first place. Lena blinked back tears. She had been invisible for so long, and now her voice had filled a room that once seemed unreachable. By the next morning, everyone knew her name. A junior employee had posted a short clip from the boardroom on social media. She used to clean the floors. Now she's designing the future. The video exploded overnight. Hundreds of thousands of views. Comments flooded in. Who is this girl? She's brilliant. This made me cry. Give her her own firm. News outlets picked it up. Headlines screamed, from mop to mastermind. Billionaire discovers hidden talent among his cleaning staff. Meet Lena, the woman redesigning the world from the bottom up. But while the world clapped, Lena's hands shook. Strangers started showing up outside the building with cameras. Old classmates tried to reach her. A reporter knocked on her apartment door. Even worse, so did the hate. This is a stunt. Bet she didn't even draw those. She's just lucky. Someone even found a photo of her brother, Noah, and posted it with a cruel caption. Lena didn't sleep that night. She curled up in the corner of her room, holding her sketchbook like a shield. She had never asked for attention. She had only wanted to be heard. Now the whole world was listening, and it was too loud. By morning, she was back in the mansion. Not to work, to quit. Elias found her in the library, sitting on the floor where it all began. I can't do this, she said, eyes red. It's too much. I'm not made for this. He sat beside her. You don't have to be made for the spotlight, he said gently. You were made to build, and that's what matters. He slid a note across the floor, pulled it small. Inside it said, you don't owe the world your story, just your truth. And your truth is already changing lives. Lena stared at the note, then slowly opened her sketchbook again. She didn't know how to handle fame, but she knew how to draw hope. And that was more powerful than any headline. The lights were off in the mansion's library. Just a soft moonlight spilled through the high windows, painting silver lines across the floor. Lena sat alone at the same desk where it all began. The place where her quiet dream had first slipped into the world. But tonight, she wasn't dreaming. She was breaking. Her sketchbook lay open in front of her, untouched. Beside it, a pile of printed articles, some praising her, others questioning everything about her. She's not qualified. A billionaire's charity case. Another Cinderella stunt. She had read every word, and each one felt like a stone in her chest. Her fingers traced over one of her first designs. She had drawn it on a day when Noah was sick, and they had no electricity. She remembered thinking, one day I'll build something better than this life. Now the world knew her name. But she didn't feel stronger. She felt exposed. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered, maybe I wasn't meant for this. Her voice echoed in the vast room, barely louder than the ticking clock on the wall. She closed her sketchbook and leaned back in the chair. For a moment she imagined walking away, getting a quiet job again, fading back into the background, where no one would judge her, where no one would expect her to shine. Then something caught her eye, taped to the inside of the library cabinet, a small folded note she hadn't seen before. She opened it slowly. In Elias's handwriting it read, "You were never invisible. You were just waiting for the right light." Underneath that, one more line, "Don't quit on the girl who drew through the darkness." Lena stared at the note for a long time, and finally she picked up her pencil. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because her purpose was louder than her fear. Months passed. Blueprints turned into permits. Permits turned into poured foundations. And poured foundations became Lena's first building. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't tall. But it was beautiful in a quiet, human way. A row of small, dignified homes lined a clean walkway. Each had a ramp, a wide front porch, a garden bed, and a light above the door. But it wasn't just shelter. It was safety, dignity, healing. Lena stood at the center of the project site, wearing a hard hat and holding the final blueprint. Her hands were dirty. Her heart was full. All around her, workers bustled. A mural team painted stars on the walls of the children's wing. Volunteers were planting flowers along the walkways. This project was more than concrete and wood. It was built from the pain she had once carried, and finally let grow into something bigger. The name of the site? The Haven Project, dedicated to single mothers, struggling families, and disabled children like her brother, people who often had nowhere else to go. Every detail was intentional. The windows were low, so children could see the sunrise. The walls had warm colors, not hospital whites, and in the center of the courtyard stood a plaque, designed by someone who used to be forgotten. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Lena didn't speak much. She just smiled quietly as a mother wheeled her daughter through one of the new homes and whispered, "We've never had a place that felt like ours." Lena wiped her eyes, and behind her Elias Reed stood, hands in his pockets, smiling with pride, but saying nothing, because he didn't need to. She had built it. She had earned it. She had arrived. The day Lena brought Noah to see the finished build was quiet. No news crews, no fanfare, just a sister, and the little boy she had promised the stars. She helped him out of the bus gently. His wheelchair bumped along the smooth new path she had designed herself. One turn, and the entire courtyard opened in front of them. Noah's eyes widened. There were children playing by the painted murals. Sunlight poured through the windows. A wind chime sang softly near the entrance to the community center. And above the doorway, twinkling in soft silver paint, were dozens of tiny hand-drawn stars, just like the ones he'd always dreamed of. "Lena," he whispered, gripping her hand. "You built this?" She nodded, kneeling beside him. "Every part of it. I thought of you." He looked at the windows, the low counters, the ramp that curved like a gentle wave, the garden bed shaped like a heart. It's like it's for us," he said softly. She smiled. "It is." Noah wheeled himself inside, looking around in silent wonder. And then, for the first time in years, he smiled. Not a polite smile, not a tired one. A full, joyful, free smile, like the weight he carried had lifted for just a moment. Lena stood behind him, eyes full of tears, her chest rising and falling with pride and disbelief. Because this wasn't just about blueprints or bricks. This was a promise kept. To Noah, to her younger self, to the world that told her she'd never make it, and to every child who had once looked up at the ceiling and imagined something brighter. A year later, Lena stood on a stage, not in an apron, not with a mop in her hand, but with a microphone and a story. She had been invited to speak at an international architecture summit, not because of a degree, but because of what she built with her heart. Behind her was a massive screen showing photos of the Haven Project. Families moving in, children painting stars, Noah smiling in the sunlight. "I never planned to become anything more than invisible," Lena said, her voice steady but soft. "But sometimes what looks like cleaning floors is actually preparing a foundation." The room was silent. She shared her journey, not just the success, but the pain. The nights she went to bed hungry, The mornings she walked miles to scrub marble floors. The hours she spent in an empty library, drawing houses in the dark. "I didn't build to be famous," she said. "I built because I knew what it was like to live without hope. And I wanted to leave behind something more than struggle." In the crowd, Elias Reed watched with quiet pride. He hadn't given Lena her brilliance. He had simply noticed it, and now she was changing the world. After her speech, a young girl in the audience ran up to her holding a notebook. "I want to draw buildings too," she said shyly. Lena knelt and smiled. "Then promise me you'll never stop, even if no one sees you yet." Outside the conference center, on a marble wall lined with past winners and celebrated designers, they engraved something new. Lena Matthews, from cleaner to creator. She built where others only dreamed, and beneath that, her very first sketch, the one she drew beside her brother, the one with the stars on the ceiling.